So I was just doing some browsing online and I came across this article title. I moved to South Korea to save money for a year. When I returned to the US, I hated it and ran back to Asia. Now, when I first saw this title, I kind of had a feeling that I knew what I was going to be reading about. It sounded somewhat familiar to me for some reason. Anyway, but it got my attention, so I ended up reading it. I actually ended up reading it twice, but not necessarily because I thought it was that interesting, but because it had a lot of very interesting expressions that I wanted to go over with you. And that's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. Just a few, not a whole lot. And if you want to go over the entire article yourself, please do. I highly recommend it because, as I always say, the best way for you to learn English, the best way for you to improve your English is to consume content online. That's probably the best way to brush up on your English, to improve your English by yourself without actually interacting with foreigners. Anyway, so let's get right into it. The first one, I knew I'd only be young once. I knew I'd only be young once. I really love the way she said this. I don't know if this is a very common phrase, but if I'm being honest, I don't think I've ever heard anybody phrase it like this. I knew I'd only be young once. And the reason she said this was now this is very early into her article, but she was telling a story about a decision that she made, a very risky decision that she made, not long after she graduated from college, but she was willing to, not only willing to, she wanted to make that decision because it was risky, and she wanted to make that risky decision because she was young. Because as she got older, well, she didn't really say this, but this is implied. As she got older, she knew that she would not be able to take those type of risks. So she wanted to make that risky decision because she said, I knew I'd only be young once. I knew I'd only be young once. I just love the way she phrased it like that. Okay, the next one. Money got tight fast. Money got tight fast. Money got tight fast. This is a much more straightforward expression compared to the previous one, but it's one of those expressions that a lot of Korean people, I think, are not very familiar with and don't use a lot. And I would like to encourage you to use this more. So money got tight fast. It's a very, very simple and effective way to say that you don't have a lot of money to spend. Basically, that's what it means. When money is tight, then you don't have a lot of money to spend. And the reason she said money got tight was it was a change that happened because when she had just graduated from college, she was doing okay. She was paying her bills, she was paying her student loan, and she was doing okay. But then she took the risk to move to a higher living cost area. I don't exactly remember which area it was, but she moved. She made that change, and her living cost went up significantly, and then money got tight. That's what she said. Money got tight. And the way she said that was money got tight fast. Money got tight fast. So what does the fast mean? It means the change happened very rapidly. Money got tight fast. The change happened very suddenly. She was suddenly overwhelmed by the amount of money that she had to pay for bills. Okay? Money got tight fast. Okay, next one. I took a sales job that sent me to Portland. I took a sales job that sent me to Portland. Now, this is an easy one, but a very effective way to say that you took a job that was in Portland. So if you wanted to have that job, you needed to be in Portland. It required you to be there. And instead of saying it like this, she said, I took a job that sent me to Portland. So the job didn't literally send her to Portland, right? A job can't send someone somewhere, but it's just another way, a much more, I think, interesting way to say that the job was in Portland and I had to go there if I wanted to take that job. So I took a job that sent me to Portland. Okay, pretty straightforward, but not the kind of expression that most Korean people like you and I can easily think of, I feel like, okay? It seems really easy enough, but I don't think I've ever said it like this. Okay, anyway, the next one. I split costs with roommates. I split costs with roommates. I split costs with roommates. So from this, we can tell that she had more than one roommate, and there was more than one thing that was costing her, right? There were many costs that needed to be covered. And so she split those costs with her roommates. She says, I split costs. There were many things that were costing me, and I split costs with my roommates. Just like we split a bill, right? You've heard that a lot before, right? Anyway, so I split costs with my roommates. All right, now very closely related to this is to live paycheck to paycheck. I'm sure you've heard this one a lot. I actually thought about not including this one, but I'm sure that at least a few of you have never heard of this and would really actually make good use of this. The key idea of this expression, living paycheck to paycheck, means you are not able to save any money. I think that's the key here. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're not saving any money because any money that you earn is going out on bills and whatever that you're spending on. And so you have nothing left. By the time the next paycheck arrives, you really don't have nothing left from your previous paycheck. And that's what living paycheck to paycheck means. Okay? All right, so that was a pretty easy one. Let's move on. Getting around was no problem since public transit was accessible and incredibly affordable. Getting around was no problem since public transit was accessible and incredibly affordable. So this is a description that she gives in her article when she's telling her story about the first time she came to Korea and found it really convenient and liberating to be able to get around so easily. And getting around basically, I think I've covered this in one of my lessons, but getting around basically means traveling from point A to point B, moving from one place to another, basically. Like for anything. It could be for the commute or to, go grocery shopping or whatever. So getting from point A to point B, that's getting around. 돌아다니는 거, 여기저기 다니는 거. It was no problem. Why? Since public transit was accessible and incredibly affordable. So these words I want you to focus on. Accessible, affordable. Difficult words. You have to get used to them. Accessible means you can use them easily. They're not hard to use. They're not difficult to use, easy to use. So public transit, not necessarily transportation. You don't necessarily have to say transportation. You say public transit was accessible, means easy to use, and incredibly affordable, means very cheap. So getting around was no problem since public transit was accessible and incredibly affordable. I also still had a ton of debt, so I was doing everything I could to keep my head above water. I also still had a ton of debt, so I was doing everything I could to keep my head above water. Now, this is a description in the article when she's telling the story of the time when she left Korea after her first stay. I think her first stay was about a year, maybe a little more than a year. And then she eventually went back to her hometown in the U.S., and she was talking about the difficulty that she was having there, mostly financial difficulty. And she says this, I also still had a ton of debt, so I was doing everything I could to keep my head above water. Basically means to survive. Instead of saying survive, she says to keep my head above water. This is a very commonly used expression in my experience. So again, I still had a lot of debt, so I was doing everything I could to keep my head above water. All right, moving on. Live on a shoestring budget. Live on a shoestring budget. Shoestring, 신발끈. To live on a shoestring budget basically means a very small budget. She's comparing the size of her budget to a shoestring, just very small and little. I suppose she could have said, she was living on a very small budget, but she just wanted to express it in this way. And I think this is like a really, really common expression that is used when talking about a very small budget. So money being very tight, not having much money to spend, living on a shoestring budget. All right, next one. Taking a job I'd already had in a place I'd already lived felt like a massive step backward. Taking a job I had already had in a place I had already lived felt like a massive step backward. So this is the part where she talks about how she got a job offer from the same hagwon from Korea. Okay, so when she said this, she was already living back in her hometown. Well, not exactly her hometown, but back in the U.S., and she was struggling financially, but at some point she got another job offer saying, from the same hagwon in Korea saying, hey, do you want to come back and work for us? It's the same place. And when she got that offer, she thought to herself, oh, this is a massive step backward. 이거는 엄청 크게 한 번 물러서는 거 아니야? In terms of her career. Like, in terms of her career, this is a massive step backward. And this is the expression I want you to focus on. A massive step backward means you're moving backward in terms of your career advancement. You're not moving forward, which you should be, but it's a massive step backward. Taking a job I already had in a place I already lived felt like a massive step backward. All right, last one. My money went much further in the country. My money went much further in the country. My money went much further in the country. Now, in this sentence, by country, she means Korea, because what happened was she eventually ended up accepting the offer, and she came back to Korea because, well, mainly she was struggling so much financially back home. And when she came back, she realized how much easier it was because her money went much further in the country. So basically what that means is that she was able to do so much more with the same amount of money. That's what she means when she says, my money went much further in the country. Okay? Anyway, so those were the few interesting expressions that I wanted to share with you from this article. If you want to go through the article yourself, read it yourself, which I highly recommend you do, I will leave a link in the description section below and in the comment section, so you can feel free to go over to the actual article and read through the article yourself. I highly recommend that you read it over many, many times because, again, repetition is everything. Okay? All right. Have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you next time.